Hey friends, Kim from Stamping and Perfection. Thank you so much for joining me. I am playing with this new Maker Forte Snail Mail Everyday Sentiments stamp set. It's got this interesting grid stamp along with lots of little image stamps and a bunch of different sentiments like happy birthday, thanks so much, love you, congratulations, thinking of you, welcome little one. I mean, the list goes on. Lots of little images that you can stamp in those squares and rectangles, and you can use it horizontally or vertically. So that, you know, like there's just the fun of that, because how many stamp sets do you have that have little stamps or little sentiments that would fit in those spaces? Like, the possibilities are endless. But I thought I would share with you a couple different ways rather than just stamping in the square that I was thinking of. As soon as I saw it, it gave me a couple of ideas I wanted to share. So I'm going to use this big grid stamp, and I'm going to use this on watercolor paper. So I'm actually going to create a colorful background with this stamp by watercoloring, and I am going to go ahead and stamp it with my Color Hive Eclipse black ink. Now this is a dye ink, so I will be embossing this also. So I'm stamping it, I'm going to stamp this twice in the Eclipse black ink, because watercolor paper is textured. Now, one thing I do want to point out, notice that I do have some ink excuse me, in the middle of those squares. You want to wipe that off, or to prevent it from happening, when you put your stamp on the stamp positioner, make sure it doesn't have any air bubbles underneath it. That's why that happens. So you want to get those air bubbles out from there, so that doesn't happen, because you don't want any of that to transfer to your project, and then you'll have to start over. So I stamped it twice in the black, and now I'm going to use my clear embossing ink here. This is my Color Hive clear embossing ink, and I'm going to use black embossing powder. You could use clear, but I just really want to get a good coverage since I'm using that textured paper. So I'm going to go ahead and add this black embossing powder, and I especially like this black embossing powder. This is much better than the last brand I have, and I think this is from Stampendous. So I am going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit with a brush and with my craft pick, because I got a few stray things here and a little smudge of ink. I did not use a powder tool because I'm super allergic to every kind of powder, cornstarch, and so forth. So you would want to use your powder tool before you did any of the stamping and the embossing. So I'm just going to clean up and then heat set that. So that took longer than ordinary to heat set on that watercolor paper for whatever reason. But now I've pulled out my perfect placement tool, and I'm using the back of it. I'm using the smooth side, not the side with the lines on it, and I'm using it like a palette. So I've taken all of the neon inks that I have from Maker Forte and just smooshed them onto the back of this perfect placement tool. Now I'm going to spritz them each with a little water, and I could not get my jar of water open for the life of me. So you can see I'm filling in the squares and rectangles with water first, and I'm just doing a simple wash. Now what I love about these neon inks is they are so bright, the colors are so bright, but when you do ink blending or watercoloring with the neon inks, you get these beautiful soft colors. So all I'm doing here is I'm putting a little bit a different color in each square or rectangle. And I could have put the ink so it was really heavy on one end and then I just drag it out, or I could let this dry and put a second coat on. Like, you can do an ombre effect if you want to, or just make it darker by adding more layers. So you'd have to let it dry in between layers to do that. But I really love this soft look of these inks. That's why I'm using them. So very, very pretty. Now if I use the other line of inks that aren't the neon ones, then you're going to get really bold, bright, beautiful colors from that. They won't be this soft, just, covering of the squares and rectangles. But I really like this. Now I am going to put this aside so that it dries, and I'll work on the second card I want to share with you while this dries. So it's going to take a little while. I live in a very humid location, so it does take a little while. Isn't that pretty? Like, that's just so pretty. A little bit of a rainbow there. And on camera, it seems like it's hard to tell the orange and the pinks apart, and the yellows and the greens sometimes, but in person you can really see the difference. So I'll put that away so I don't spill it, and I'm going to pull out another sheet of paper. This is regular cardstock, and I'm going to put my perfect placement tool back underneath this. Now my plan was to create sort of like a night sky. So I pulled out acid wash and I forget what the purple one, Rara skirt I pulled out. And as I was doing this, I realized that this is not going to be dark enough for what I have in my head. I continue on and I'll, give it a try here. And Purple Rain is the other color, but I know it's not going to be dark enough for what I want to do. I'll try it out anyway, but it's not giving me the result I want. So I pulled out the Coronation Purple that I just recently got. I've only used this a couple times. This is a brand new ink pad and it is super juicy. So I'm getting way more ink than I intended on this card. And isn't this color gorgeous? So I pulled out the acid wash and tried to blend it again, but the regular dye inks and the neon inks don't really blend well just because of the saturation of the color differences. So I'm going to go all out here. I pulled out the Eclipse black and I'm going to cover up that purple on the outside, and I'll go back and put the purple on the inside. I'm going to have this dark, beautiful night sky. This is what I had in my head. Not quite so purple, but this will work perfectly. So I let it dry for a few minutes, which wasn't enough time, and you'll see that in a couple minutes here. I pulled out this new Slimline bat stencil. I love this stencil, and I am going to blend on some of my clear ink. So I'm just going over the ones that fit on there and adding clear ink to them. And I left the stencil in place, and I pulled out, I believe this is either Pluto or Neptune Kaleidoscope Powder. And I love these mica powders. They're just beautiful. I'm using the double-ended brush, so it's got a little brush on each end, and I'm just putting that powder on while that stencil is still in place. Now the stencil will clean off fine. I don't have to rush to do it. It's just mica powder, so it isn't going to hurt it. But when I take this off, I love how it looks. Now here you can see as I go to wipe off the excess, instead of wiping it off, I'm kind of brushing it on, but it's okay because look at all that metallic sheen I get. I like it. I'm okay with that. But if you don't like that, you'll want to let it dry. I should have hit it with my heat tool before I put those bats on. So I have a second sheet of white cardstock, and I'm using the fog ink and just blending it on. I'm not trying to get my blending to be a smooth blend. I like the variation in colors for the techniques that I have in mind. So I did put that other piece with the bats on it aside to completely dry, by the way. And you do want to spritz the Kaleidoscope powder with water or hairspray to set it, so that if somebody rubs their hand across it, they don't smear it. So on this fog, I did stencil on this great spider and spider web with just a second layer of fog ink. So where I added the ink, you can see that it's darker. And I will end up going back and adding at least one more layer with this, I'll put the stencil right back down and go back over it later on in my card making process because I wanted it just a little darker. So again, I'm going to use my Eclipse black ink and stamp this grid. And you do want to, again, be careful with the air bubbles so you don't get ink in the middle, because you can see the smudge on the card, which I will cover up. So I'm using a straight edge and my craft knife to cut down that line that's sort of in the middle, and then along the top and the bottom. So I get a kind of a gatefold here. So I'm just going to use it in a slightly different way. And that bat piece that I created earlier is going to like peekaboo on the inside. So when someone opens those gates, they'll see the bats. And I think that, you know, with that Kaleidoscope powder and they get that really fun metallic sheen, I love it. So I'm using double-sided tape here, and I will attach that back panel to this. And you'll see that it gives kind of a nice surprise. Now, the only thing I wish I'd done was I wish I'd done the ink blending on both sides of that white piece, put that gray on both sides of the white piece. So you can see I'm just gluing my sentiment down to one side. This sentiment is from the All Seasons sentiment paper pack. You just cut them apart. And so I just put the glue on the one side, and I'm adding 3 neon orange. I can never remember whether these are bittersweet or outrageous, but they're so bright. They're perfect for Halloween, absolutely perfect. So I'm just going to add those with a little bit of my art glitter glue, and my favorite tool here, the jewel picker tool, and the on the hook tweezers. Love, love, love them. So now I'm thinking I wanted this to stay closed. So, you know, I'm trying to decide how I'm going to do it, and I want to fix the inside because I don't like that the inside part of those gate folds is white. So I'm going to go ahead and ink blend on some fog ink on the inside, and I'm going to cover up the back of this sentiment with another sentiment. But first, I've got these little tiny, these are 1/4 inch diameter magnets, and they're super thin. So I glued one to the back of that, and then I'll take a second one and attach it to the first one. And I accidentally got 3 there. These things are very tiny. And so I'm just testing it out. So I'll put that on the back of the first one, add some glue to the back of that magnet, and put it down. And I'm not going to try to open it yet because the glue's not dry, but I'll put my jar of water on top and let that sit. And it only takes a little bit because that art glitter glue is truly amazing. Like, really amazing. So I'm going to glue this down to a black card panel. This is 4 1/4 by 11. I scored and folded this at 5 1/2. And there you can see that magnet works beautifully. And I did go ahead after this and cover up the back of that sentiment with another one of those all season sentiments. And I did ink blend some gray and a little bit of the purple on the inside of those. And I like that much better. So for the second card, now that this is dry, I'm going to just go ahead on a scrap piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to stamp some of the little image stamps from the Snail Mail Everyday Sentiment set. So I have this stem of leaves, and that is palm tree ink. Now I'm using Yellowstone, and I'm just doing the flower a few times. And I'm also going to stamp this flower in the Tip Tree Jam. That's what it is. Tip Tree Jam. It's a really pretty color. It's like a pink. Sometimes it looks red. If you pair it with green, you almost feel like it looks red. To me, it looks red. But in this case, with the yellow and the green, it looks pink. So I used a little bit of foam double-sided adhesive tape, and I trimmed down this 1/4 inch. So that panel is now 4 by 5 1/4. I put it on a navy blue card base that just happened to be sitting on my desk, And that is cut at 5.5 by 8.5. I scored it at 4.25. And I'm going to add some foam to the back of the sentiment and to the flowers. The stems are just going to get glued flat. And I'm using my double-sided little foam here because I cannot find my foam dots. They're on my table somewhere. So I'm just going to kind of, instead of stamping these in the squares, I thought it would be interesting to cluster, to stamp them and cut them out with my Brother Scan and Cut. And then I'm just going to cluster them together and make a little cluster of flowers and leaves in one of the corners. And I think that that's a fun way to use them. So the flower, that you can see the flowers are on the foam, the stems are just getting tucked underneath. And I really like the combination of bright colors on top of those soft pastels in the background. And you could build more than one cluster if you wanted to. I just built one in the corner, and then I used a bunch of crown jewel gems. You can see I have several different things of crown jewel gems there. So I'm going to put, these are the rah-rah skirt ones, I believe, that I'm using for the center of the yellow flowers. And then I have these neon yellow ones that I'm going to use in the center of the pink. And I have some neon green, which I believe are lime wired. I believe that's the name of the color of the neon green ones. And I'm going to add those on the card itself. And I love the way this came out. I haven't put my sentiment on yet, so I still have that to put on. So I'll just add those. And those on the hook tweezers are amazing. Like, I can't believe how easy it makes to pick up these tiny little gems. And I'll add the sentiment and that magic wand tool. If you don't have these two tools, these are really really well designed tools. Like that jewel picker has the jewel picker on one end and the craft pick on the other. Two tools you reach for constantly. Like, I use my craft pick and the jewel pick for several different functions, and I'm always reaching for them. And this is art glitter glue that I'm using. By the way, you can get those little bottles on Amazon with those special tips. So that's going to complete this card. And I'm really happy with this. I have so many more ideas for this. I can't wait to share them in future videos. And I really hope they do come out with more add-on kits for holidays and things, because that would be super fun. So thank you so much for watching. I'll put all the links below. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed. Thank you for watching, friends. Have a wonderful day.